Coming up, the rock epitome of elegance, a singer and group whose beautiful melodies and suave style brought a sophistication to rock and pop in the 1970s and 1980s. We also count down their top 5 songs on Professor of Rock, brought to you by Zenni Eyewear, coming up. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If music is a priority in your life, you're going to want to subscribe below to this channel so you don't miss out on our daily episodes celebrating the greatest music of the rock era. Also, become a patron. Your support means so much to our mission. Now, on this edition of VOX, we showcase the Prince of Art Rock, the elegant Mr. Bryan Ferry. You know, there are certain artists that will provide the soundtrack for an unforgettable night of passion. You turn the lights down low, you light the candles, you put on some Frank Sinatra, Sarah Vaughan, Nat King Cole, Johnny Mathis, Etta James, Marvin Gaye, Sade, and you'll have the ambiance for a perfect evening. But trust me, even if you don't recognize the name, the voice of Bryan Ferry should absolutely be on that short list of the most dignified crooners of romance. Inspired by Elvis Presley, Fats Domino, Little Richard, Otis Redding, and Sir Cliff Richard, Bryan Ferry crafted his own distinctive singing style, developing a beautiful voice that matches his sophisticated flair, elegant, charming, and gallant. Bryan Ferry has quietly become one of the most influential artists of the rock era, deeply affecting many notable performers, including Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, there's Morrissey, and David Bowie. And think about it, particularly his Serious Moonlight phase. If David Bowie is the thin white duke, then at 6'1" Bryan Ferry is the tall, suave chevalier. As a young lad, Bryan grew up in a poor working class family in Washington County, Durham in Northeast England. In his late teens, he studied fine art and learned to paint at Newcastle University from 64 to 68. In fact, some of his paintings would later be on display at the Tate Gallery, now the Tate Britain, in 1970. After stints with several groups in the late 60s, Bryan got together with his close musician friends to form Roxy Music. Man, love him. Along with Bryan, the early lineup of Roxy Music included Graham Simpson, Andy McKay, Dexter Lloyd, David O'List, and Brian Eno. Before the core of the band settled in with a catalyst of Bryan Ferry, Phil Manzanera, Andy McKay, and Paul Thompson, and as a band member on 3 albums, we need to add Eddie Jobson. Now, from 1973 through 1982, Bryan was the lead singer and frontman for Roxy Music, where he established an image of dashing panache. During his tenure with Roxy Music, Bryan was very active with solo projects, and he continued to make amazing music well past the breakup of the group in '82. Ironically, the last Roxy Music album, Avalon, was an artistic zenith that was a pivotal springboard for the extremely successful solo career of Bryan Ferry. Bryan and the nucleus of Roxy Music were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. During his acceptance speech, Bryan eloquently acknowledged the many players that contributed vitally to the unique sound of Roxy Music. Having said that, here is my Bryan Ferry Fiver. My top 5 Bryan Ferry recorded performances, both Roxy Music and solo combined. This is very hard. Now, first, I have to give an honorable mention, for sure. The title track of the masterpiece album, Avalon, as we just mentioned, the song Avalon has always been a life-affirming song for me. It's like a mystery that means something different to me each year with every different experience that I have in my life. These lyrics alone describe that magic that I'm trying to convey here. When the samba takes you out of nowhere and the background's fading out of focus, yes, the picture's changing every moment, and your destination, you don't know it. Beautiful. And your destination, you don't know it. Number 5, from 1980, Over You, the lead single off the Roxy Music album Flesh and Blood. Co-written by Bryan and guitarist Phil Manzanera, Over You was a number 5 hit in the UK. Bryan performs Over You with the pining of a desperate lover. The highlight is the earnest sincerity in the way Bryan sings the second verse. How can I go on crying so long over you? Where strangers look for new love, I'm so lost in love over you. Love it. The music in Over You is very interesting because on its own, the score creates an enduring melancholy. Even the abstract electronics heard in the bridge provokes an emotive spirit. That's one of the attributes that made Roxy Music such a cool band. They blended stark romantic lyrics with progressive instrumentation that resulted in producing a very unconventional song structure. Over You finishes with lush musicianship, Bryan's moody piano playing, overlaid with Phil Manzanera's guitar licks, really accentuate the atmospheric sax backtrack by Andy McKay. Number 4, Sensation, from the 1985 solo Bryan Ferry release, Boys and Girls, which is a superb album, I might add. I like to call the Boys and Girls album Bryan Ferry's solo Avalon, because it has so many amazing cuts. Now, by the time the Boys and Girls LP came out, Bryan had dropped 5 solo albums, and a lot had happened in the 8 years in between Bryan's 5th solo release, The Bride Stripped Bare in '78, and his 6th solo album, Boys and Girls in '85. Most significantly was the dissolution of Roxy Music in '83. The Boys and Girls album was critically important for Bryan's evolution as a solo artist, and he took full advantage of his immense popularity within the artist community, who, of course, relished the opportunity to work with Bryan. The recording of Boys and Girls featured a star-studded cast that included so many different musicians. There was coveted studio guitarist Neil Hubbard and Keith Scott, Dire Straits guitarist and lead singer Mark Knopfler, amazing, along with Dire Straits keyboardist Guy Fletcher, Omar Hakim on drums, love Omar, we've done an interview with him, Tony Levin from King Crimson on bass, David Sanborn on sax, engineered by the great Bob Clearmountain, and the highly acclaimed Rhett Davies, who co-produced the song with Bryan, as well as the entire Boys and Girls album. Sensation kicks off Boys and Girls as the lead track, and it's a perfect song to kick off the album with its seductively orchestral dance beat. And of course, Bryan's passionate crooning, along with his haunting falsetto overdubs. Pink Floyd's David Gilmour delivered the swirling, majestic lead guitar riffs on Sensation. It was reminiscent of his guitar work in the Pink Floyd track Run Like Hell from The Wall. Number 3, Love Is the Drug. Now, this was the only Roxy Music song to break the top 40 in America. Ridiculous. It reached number 30 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1975. The song, of course, much bigger in the UK. It rose all the way to number 2 and number 3 in Canada. Now, the genesis of Love Is the Drug came from an instrumental that Roxy horn player Andy McKay created. Andy gave the instrumental track to Bryan Ferry, who had an epiphany for the lyrics while kicking leaves around in London's Hyde Park, as I understand it. He put the lyrics together based on the premise that love is like a drug that once you feel it, you become addicted, you can't shake free. Love Is the Drug begins with the sound of a slamming car door, followed by the turning of the ignition and the revved up motor of a speeding Spitfire, leading to an exhilarating ride with a swaggering Bryan Ferry vocal that intrigues us like the adventure of a James Bond film. Bryan Ferry sings the lyrics in a narrative style that is more reminiscent of early Roxy Music material like Do the Strand and The Thrill of It All, and that explodes in the chorus with which is, of course, the apex of Bryan Ferry's postmodernism before he transitioned to becoming a stylish icon with a matinee idol haircut and tailored suits. The pulsating rhythm of John Gustafson's bass line is pivotal to the progressive arrangement of Love Is the Drug. It's a penetrating bass line that was very influential with other artists, such as famed producer Nile Rodgers of Chic. Rodgers admitted that the bass groove in Love Is the Drug was an inspiration for the bass timing in the Chic song Good Times. Rodgers was one of the most acclaimed artists that would later work on Bryan's Boys and Girls album. Number 2, from 1985, Slave to Love. The first single from the Boys and Girls record. It was a number 10 hit in the UK. Slave to Love. This is an incredible song. It features a classic intimate Bryan Ferry vocal with the genius pastiche of Avalon. Like I said, Bryan caresses and warbles with that fantastic romantic flutter in Slave to Love that makes him such an exceptional interpreter of song. As a lyricist, Slave to Love is arguably his most poetic work. Think about these words. You're running with me, and don't touch the ground. We're the restless hearted, not the chained and bound. The sky is burning, a sea of flame. Though your world is changing, I will be the same.
Though your world is changing, I will be the same.
Words that are truly expansive, highly sensational. Bryan Ferry is one of the greatest poets of the rock era. These lyrics combined with the hair-raising and evocative music is why this song is such a revelation of the 80s. To expand on it a little bit more, Slave to Love has like this swaying Latin feel to its melody that adds a dreamy hopefulness to a seemingly sad number, but it uniquely complements the dark passion of Bryan's vocals. It's one of those curveballs that makes Bryan's music so entrancing. By the way, the arresting guitar solo at the end of Slave to Love was performed by Neil Hubbard. I remember the first time that I heard this song, it immediately raised the bar that only songs like In Your Eyes or There's a Light That Never Goes Out or Pictures of You could compete with.
Tell her I'll be waiting in the usual place.
It was part of every mixtape that I ever made from that point forward. And number one, More Than This, the melancholy masterpiece from the vaunted Roxy music album, Avalon, released in 1982. Bryan Ferry just simply nails the song with a powerful tone of despondency in his vocal performance that resonates with anyone that has felt the agony of a broken love affair. It's like this vicious punch to the stomach that can hurt far worse than any other physical affliction. Bryan Ferry has been asked many times why he thinks More Than This has endured. And his answer is fundamental. He believes that the gloomy dreariness of the constant clouds and rain that he experienced while writing the song in Western Ireland put him in a perfect state of mind to come up with such a wonderfully dark composition. More Than This ascended to number 6 in Australia and the UK. In America, it attracted a cult new wave following, but failed to crack the Billboard Hot 100. I don't understand that. That's a perfect one for number 1 in our hearts. It's difficult to mention my appreciation for Bryan Ferry's vocal performance on More Than This without just gushing over the depth of the entire Avalon album, on which More Than This is the first cut. Avalon is one of the greatest albums of all time. I mean, the title track, for instance, like I said, an incredible song, as is The Space Between and the main thing. But all 10 songs on the album are outstanding. Even the instrumental Terra is beautiful, showcasing Andy McKay's stellar talent as a saxophonist. Bryan Ferry is extraordinary throughout. The Avalon album was artistically centered about the tragic romance of the King Arthur legend. When King Arthur dies, the queens ferry him off to Avalon, which according to folklore is this enchanted mystery island that is portrayed as the ultimate romantic destination. It is a must-have album in your collection and one of my top 10 desert island discs. I mean, it's just one of the greats, as I said. More Than This in particular is one of those songs, one of those once-in-a-lifetime songs, let it be said, on the same level as like Let It Be by the Beatles or God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. It's a modern-day pop standard. It's a song that composers like Cole Porter, George Nye, or Gershwin, they would have, if they were alive, wished that they had written. Delivered with such an awesome sincerity, and like I said, a heart-rending lament that is typical Bryan Ferry. I say typical to mean that on Bryan's worst day is any other artist's best day. Bryan gets to a place with his performance that's both harrowing and life-affirming. The song is perfection, and its essence has inspired some great moments in pop culture.
More than this, you know there's nothing more than this. Tell me one thing.
Bryan Ferry. I mean, what else can be said? He's one of a kind. He's created a body of work that is incomparable. I mean, earlier I talked about how the album Avalon is an island represented as an earthly paradise in the western seas to which King Arthur and other heroes were carried at death. There's no doubt that the art rock maestro, Bryan Ferry is on that same course. After he lives another 1,000 years, of course. Let's celebrate Bryan Ferry. To hear all the songs that we discuss here, click on our curated playlist below. You can hear Avalon and all these incredible songs. To purchase the Roxy music masterpiece Avalon, click on our links below in the description, including books on the band and other merch. We want to celebrate this incredible band the right way. If you like our content, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Click on notifications so you never miss an episode. Last of all, please support us on Patreon to help keep the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.